So we're standing in front of the Casa Rosada, and a woman in the crowd, she was a journalist, I don't remember who she worked for, suddenly collapsed and was writhing on the ground, and she was having an epileptic fit, an epileptic seizure, I guess you could call it. And someone said to me, well, we can't help her because we'll miss the shot. We'll miss the picture of the president coming out of the Casa Rosada. And if we don't get that shot, we'll get fired. So here we are, 40-some people, standing around, waiting for something that may or may not happen, and there's a woman suffering in front of us. And it dawned on me at that moment that we were the skunks at the picnic. We were the guys who came to take pictures of people suffering, but didn't actually bring anything to help. We weren't concerned so much about people as much as we were concerned about keeping our jobs. And so I lost my faith that the work that I was doing as a journalist was helping anybody but ourselves. I mean, that was just my perspective. And there were lots of incidents that I found where there were situations going on in other countries where I was visiting and where I was covering news or working on a project where we were not empowered to do anything. One of the stranger ones, strangely enough, I got hired by John Denver when he was alive. His organization hired me to go to Africa on a Lear jet because he had written a song about world hunger, and he was going to spontaneously sing the song. The idea would be that he would make a film about how he was inspired by the hunger, and he would sing a song about it. Of course, we already had the song, so in a sense it's all stagecraft, right? Ultimately, I left the project, but when I read in the papers that they flew around the country on this junket, they couldn't find any hungry people, which is kind of unbelievable if you think about it, right? Hungry people, you can never find them when you need them, right? What an outrageous notion. But to me, it was a replay of the same problem I was having in the media world. We weren't touching real people. We were exploiting, we were looking for opportunities to make a point about world hunger without actually doing anything about it. And I'm not trying to tar John Denver's legacy. He did a lot of really great stuff, right? But he was in show business, and I was in show business, and I realized that show business was the wrong place for me to have a social conscience. The first time I asked a guy at ABC News in New York if I could cover a story about land-applied sludge, he said, oh, do you believe in ball? And I thought, what's that got to do with it? A, no I don't, and B, it's got nothing to do with anything. These guys were cynical about anything that was real. And so I decided to get out, except that was harder to get out than it was to get in. For one, nobody I knew in the television business wanted to help me get out of that business because this was a business people fought to get into. You know, you get to meet famous people, you get to travel, you get to have an expense account, you do all this cool stuff. But the truth is you don't really get to change the world. And I was idealistic enough, mind you, this was in my early 20s, I'm 60 now, this is a long time ago, but in my early 20s, I thought the way to change the world was to harness the media machinery that got out to the world and changed how people thought about these problems. Until I decided that I wanted to actually do something hands-on. I wanted to get out of that game and kind of push through that envelope and actually touch some of these communities where we had only covered their pain. The problem was, I didn't know how to do that. I decided to go to law school, and a lot of folks I worked with in television thought that was some kind of a gimmick. They kept thinking there was some kind of, what's this going on? Nowadays, I run into people on airplanes I used to work with in television, and they look at me like I died. Where have you been? I thought you were dead. I said, well, no, what are you doing now? I said, well, I'm the Riverkeeper on the Patuxent. You can see in their eyes now they know I'm dead, right? Because it had nothing to do with what I used to do at all in that world. And I'm okay with that. In a way, that's, to me, that was my journey through self-actualization. I feel that most of my work in activism on my river has actually helped me find where I fit in to the world, my place in the world. I didn't like the place that I had in television. There were a million folks who could do that work and probably do it a whole lot better than me. The biggest argument for staying in it was that there was a lot of money attached to it. But it was blood money, as far as I was concerned, if it didn't do anything to change the world that we were connected to. So the neighborhood activism that I was doing in my spare time began to really kind of overtake. It was the work that I was doing in my professional life. It was much more interesting work, it was much more exciting work, and the problems were quite intense. But I must say, my identity as I exited the law school adventure and ended up in the riverkeeper stuff, and what seduced me, and I think I use the word seduced because I fell in love with riverkeeping when I first heard Bobby Kennedy talk about it. Bobby Kennedy is the chairman of the board, and the thing he said that really caught my imagination, he said that the creator, whoever the creator is to you, speaks to us most acutely through nature. And that resonated with me. I thought, wow, I feel pretty whole when I'm standing on a mountain, if I'm under the stars, when I'm looking at the ocean. These are places that really fire me up, and I want to do something to save these things. So I was all in, totally all in. Then I read the book called The Water Keepers, and there they had activists on the Hudson River who were fighting oil tankers And they were using spears and canoes and bows and arrows. I mean, they were doing all this wild stuff, but the key was they were winning. They were making a difference. They were actually succeeding. So I thought, I've got to be a part of this stuff. It turned out to be nothing that I thought it was, in a sense. You can change the world, I found, but there are some hooks to it.